Hi, and welcome to Real Nurse Stories. I'm thrilled today to be able to interview Samantha, who's a clinical nurse and she's working in telehealth in Brisbane, Australia. Samantha identifies as an Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander woman. And I just want to say, Samantha, welcome to the show. And if you would just like to tell us a little bit about where you're from, that would be great.
Hey Eva, thanks for introducing me and lovely to meet you. So I'm a Koori woman from down in Ngunnawal, Wiradjuri country, which is around sort of Canberra and Wagga in New South Wales, Australia. So I moved up here around 6 years ago to Brisbane.
Okay, well that's great. Thank you for sharing that, because that helps just to put into context for me and for the people listening. So thank you, Samantha. And what I'd like to do now really is start right at the beginning, Samantha, of your journey into nursing. I know that you've been a nurse for 6 years, but I'd just like to really go back to what made you decide to go into nursing.
Yep, so I never actually had any plans to go into nursing originally. I have a mum who was a nurse, and her only thing she ever said is, I don't care what you do when you grow up, but don't become a nurse. The shift work is horrible. The lifestyle's horrible. Just don't do it. I don't care what you do, just not nursing. So I was studying other aspects of health. I actually ran my own business as a soft tissue therapist for a little while. And I was working as a first responder and a lifeguard. So health has always been an interest of mine. It's been about 17 years now I've been in health. And I started off doing the degree of paramedicine because I only did a certificate previously. And then I did the nursing, and then I ended up dropping the paramedicine because I realised the career prospects weren't as much as nursing was.
Yeah.
And here I am, I guess.
So your mum's advice didn't put you off then, Samantha?
I guess it did for a while, which is why I did other health things first. But eventually I followed the footsteps.
Yeah, it came back round.
Yeah.
Did your mum often talk about nursing? Do you remember that when you were growing up? Did she talk about what she was doing and the role? And
yeah, so she was actually doing nursing while we were kids and things as well. So and Dad had previously worked in the health industry as well. So he was a wards person at the hospital, and then he became a sales rep. So he used to go in and like watch surgeries and promote surgical products and things. So Dad has his background in that way. And then, you know, through growing up, Mum worked night shift while Dad was at day shifts. That way, you know, there was always someone at home to watch us. And, you know, she'd always come home and worked in different areas. And then I remember she became a regional district coordinator or something like that for aged care back in New South Wales, and used to travel a little bit for it and things, and did asthma clinics. And I think just seeing the variety of opportunities that nursing gives you was something that drew me to it.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And it sounds like it definitely kind of runs in the family healthcare, doesn't it? Both mum and dad.
Yes. Yeah. Well, before that, I don't think anybody was in healthcare. So.
No. Oh, so tell me a little bit about your training, Samantha. What was it like training as a nurse?
So I did my enrolled nursing training, and then I did my registered nursing a little bit later. And I found they were both very, very different. Enrolled nursing was very skill-based, focused on sort of, you know, the clinical knowledge that you know, and the hands-on knowledge and things that you can do. Whereas as a registered nurse, I actually really struggled with. It was very academic focused. You had to write essays and, you know, do PowerPoint presentations and all of these sort of things. So they were both very different. I remember going through my enrolled nursing and I felt really good. I walked away with an honours in it. So I felt, you know, quite privileged, and I got a certificate. And from that, I was nominated for ACT Australian of the Year, you know, nominations as well. Not that I got, you know, all the way to the end, but I was still in the top 6 of, you know, and then I went to university and I just struggled. And at one point I almost dropped out.
Yeah.
So.
And am I right in saying that your enrolled nurse training would be more hospital based and practical based? Yeah,
very much so. So enrolled nursing was very much focused on clinical. Our end assessments was actually quite hard. So the end assessment for my enrolled nursing, I had a patient. We had 2 hours, and I had a patient, and then there was another nurse doing her test at the same time. And we had to draw up our IV antibiotics and give them, but we had to know all the contraindications, indications, adverse events, you know, everything to do with that medication off the top of our head from a list, and we had to tell them for whichever one we were using, depending on the scenario we got. And then there was a complication in the scenario, and we had to respond to that complication and come up with a nursing prognosis and management of it, and then obviously escalate things at the end and use our buddy nurse for checks and that sort of thing. So, you know, that was a final exam for my enrolled nursing, which was quite challenging. Like, you know, and then
because it kind of gives you a good grounding though, doesn't it? Because my training, I did my training in the UK, and my training was very much like that, very hospital based and practical. You had so many practical assessments like a medication and wound care, things like that. And we didn't really have to do the same level of academic study that you do now in universities, and it was only much later when I went on to study as a qualified nurse. That transition from being a practical nurse to being academic is actually quite difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it was really challenging.
Yeah. And I can remember for a little while I used to teach in the university, and we had mature students who come into nursing having done lots of other things before, and that was the one thing they always struggled with was, you know, how do you write academically? It was like this magic thing that everybody chased and struggled with. And it's funny because once somebody explains to you how to do it and you get it, it's like, right, that's what it is.
I don't know. I did my postgrad this year, and I can't say that I don't think it's like riding a bike for me.
No. Well, that's okay. Everybody's different, aren't they? I mean, But I know that transition is difficult. Yeah. So did you enjoy your training, Samantha, apart from the transition to academic?
I certainly did enjoy it. Like, it certainly opened up a lot more experiences. And I think at that point where I was going to drop out, obviously wasn't a very good point. You know, as you mentioned at the start, you know, I'm a Koori woman, so I identify as Aboriginal myself, and we had a subject at university they got failed for, and that subject was Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander health. You know, so, and part of it was, you know, we had to write a reflection about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health, and, you know, the impacts that it has today and things, and we could use first-hand experience and also evidence, so we could use a bit of both. And I got told that what I was writing was incorrect, and that's not what things were actually like, and I was making up stories, so they failed me. And I think at that stage, that's when I realised that universities actually have an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander unit, and it was lucky enough that somebody had directed me to them, and the person there, Richard, you know, was a really, really good mentor, and if it wasn't for him, I think I would have dropped out of uni completely. So it's nice to know that there's other mentors and things out there, and I think that really helped. And then, you know, I guess once I moved different places, it was good, you know, that we had a really good group where I studied in Canberra. And then I moved up to Queensland for my last year, and I found that really hard because I didn't really know anyone. It was the last year, so it's mostly prac-based. And
that must have been really tough for you to fail that assignment, given that you identify as an Aboriginal woman. That must have been a real, because culturally that's part of your identity and who you are, isn't it? And for somebody to say that to you, that must have been really difficult on a personal level.
Yeah, I think it was hard because obviously you grow up and, you know, in our culture we do storytelling and story times, you know, and for that's what we're doing at the moment, you know, yarning, talking, that's how story time's done. So that's how we communicate through different things. Obviously, you know, I had stories through mum and through other people I spoke to and other people I knew, and you know, you'd, I guess, you know, hear those stories and take them on board and you know, listen to them and try and share them again, and then to be told that all of these things I'd been told from everyone and the things that I'd experienced for myself as well were all apparently wrong.
And that actually says more about the person who said that, actually, doesn't it, than you know, the way that you have written about it. really. It's, I guess, demonstrates a lack of understanding really about culture, which is sad. It's sad to think, you know, that was your experience, and I know that was some time ago. Like to think that's different. Do you think that is different now? Do you think things have changed?
I think for some parts things have certainly changed. The problem was back then, and still is now, is that the academia doesn't necessarily transcript and transpire what actually happened. And I think that's where the biggest, I guess, gap is between it. You know, and even still, there's some people up here, and I've been talking to them about whether we go on and potentially write maybe further academic studies for what it's like in community and the health and the barriers and that sort of thing, you know, for the region that we live in, because where we live in Logan, you know, the government sort of says it's a low socioeconomic area. We know that people have multiple comorbidities. You know, and we looked at writing a paper and we thought, oh, how about we have a look to see what's already out there? And there wasn't really anything.
No.
So, you know, it's not necessarily always a lack of culture.
No.
It's a lack of resources, I think, that there's not, you know, that resource out there for people to actually learn and develop from.
Yeah. And do you think you will? Will you go ahead and write?
We will see. I certainly am happy to, you know, contribute to it. But as I said, I'm not the most academic person. So
sometimes that's a good way to do it, though, is to do it kind of collectively with a few people. You know, I've done that when I kind of way back when same thing really, somebody suggested writing an article and I was like, oh no, can't do that, don't know how to do that, you know. And we did it as a group, a few of us, and everybody wrote kind of, we divided it up and everybody did their own section and then we brought it together. And it's actually a really good way to start to gain that experience of writing an academic article and getting it published. So sometimes that can be a good way to get over that that hurdle.
Yes, it'll be something I'm considering, but
because I know that you're very passionate about Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander health, and I know that that's part of the role that you're doing now. Can you just kind of share a little bit about how you came to do the role that you're doing now and what it is that you're doing?
Yeah, so the role I'm doing at the moment is something that somebody that I work with, because I still work in another position as well on a permanent basis, and this is a contract that I have. And somebody else that I'd worked with through doing other roles and different things previously asked if I would like to apply for it. So the role is for, as you mentioned earlier, for telehealth. So there is a number of us who are now employed, you know, with the help of COVID funding, to roll out a phone service for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders. So when you call up for, you know, 1-3 health services, you can ask to speak to an Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander nurse. And part of my role as a clinical nurse is going to be trying to engage community, making sure we've got all the different Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander resources and, you know, health clinics and that sort of stuff that's all around Queensland, and putting them on our databases. That way, when they call up, you know, we can give them culturally appropriate places to go to as well, which will hopefully, you know, help to close a gap and improve compliance to treatments and that sort of thing by speaking to someone else that understands their culture and understands, I guess, where their anxiety is from going to hospitals at times and things is coming from, and hopefully we can help to, close that gap.
Yeah, and that's a really important need really, isn't it? Because I know a little bit from previous roles, there is huge need to have culturally appropriate education, and sometimes I think lots of us have been guilty of that one size fits all approach, you know, with many cultures, not just Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. I think it's a wider issue, and I think to have something like that must be hugely helpful actually. Because do you get lots of calls from kind of remote and rural communities? Is it predominantly those areas?
No, it's predominantly southeast Queensland actually at the moment. So yeah, the role for me will be to, as I said, engage with community, and that'll be more focusing at some of those remote areas that might have more limited access to, healthcare and that sort of thing, and seeing, I guess, where we can help them. And I think something like telehealth, especially in this day and age with COVID, people are afraid to go outside.
Yeah.
And a lot of our Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders, we know that we're more risk for cardiac disease, for renal failure. We know they're high risk for diabetes and these things. So sometimes we do take a little bit more caution, I guess, with leaving the house and going into communities. So something like telehealth, I think, is absolutely vital and amazing, because it means they don't necessarily have to leave the house, at that moment. They can, we can give them those sort of health recommendations after we go through a bit of a nursing assessment and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, I know from, again, Western Australia has done a lot of work in that space around telehealth, and it's been hugely successful in opening up access to all kinds of services that previously people would have had to travel to metro, and all the difficulties around that in terms of leaving family, and family not being able to come and visit and support that person. Sometimes they could be in hospital for a very long time, and I think psychologically people don't do well when they're cut off from their family and they don't have that connection, and it must be quite a lonely and scary experience. That's something that I used to observe a lot in the service that I worked, because we had many patients who identified as Aboriginal and just were, it was really sometimes very sad to see the loneliness and the isolation, and you think how that shouldn't be in a healthcare facility where we're trying to help people back to recovery, and that social psychological connection is part of that recovery. And I think that's better understood now. There's still a long way to go, as you accurately point out there, and I think there's a big need for it. Tell me a little bit about the culturally sensitive education. What kinds of things do you work with people who contact the service? Tell me a little bit more about that.
So our service is a generic service in terms of everybody calls up. And I guess when they speak to us, sometimes we can understand the different language we use. There's obviously hundreds of languages between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages, but there's also Aboriginal English, where you use a few different words. That's where you hear the word deadly or gamen and wamba, different things like that. These words that for us can be normal and common to use, but other people obviously don't understand them. And I guess it's a little bit of a slang as well as a little bit of, words. And it's about that, I guess, finding the right words to use with people and understanding the way they talk, because sometimes we don't say things the way that they're intended from other people. So, we don't, and sometimes, we say things and people think we're coming off really rude, but for us, that's how our culture speaks. It's not us trying to be rude, but because other people don't always understand the culture, they can misinterpret things sometimes. Obviously it doesn't always happen, but it certainly does. And I think that's been one of the biggest things with the word deadly. Like, to us, deadly is really positive, it's really powerful, it's a really strong word. But when you say it in healthcare, a lot of people still think deadly is like lethal, like somebody's going to die. So I was talking to someone today about different things, and they were telling me a story about how he was Torres Strait Islander, and up in the islands, Queensland government company came out and was trying to talk about, quitting smoking. And their promotion was deadly smoking, time to give up. And that was their promotion in the Torres Strait Islands. So then obviously everyone was like, oh yeah, sweet, this is sick. So then they all started smoking, because they thought, this is how we're going to get better, because these people from health have come here and told us, smoking's deadly. So then a lot of people started, taking up smoking. And sometimes it's about that language, it's about the communication, because obviously the message was that smoking can kill you.
Yes.
But
yeah.
because they use the word deadly, and to us deadly is positive, then
yeah. That's fascinating, isn't it, in terms of, you know, just it's something simple like one word having a different meaning actually changes the whole context of that health education message. And it kind of makes you wonder about, you know, how much engagement and involvement with community there was or not, perhaps around, you know, just taking that suggestion and that message and checking that out. Because clearly if they had kind of done that, then those understandings would have been there. So yeah, it's so important to have that connection with the community and to engage and involve around healthcare messages.
Absolutely. And I think the literature that's out there does say that if you want a project that's going to be within Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander health to be successful, you need somebody who identifies as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander to lead the project.
Yes.
Because that's at the end of the day how it's going to be successful. And I think that's something that we're certainly starting as a government to recognise.
Yeah.
And we are certainly starting to improve on, but I still think there's, you know, a little bit more that we can do. But we're certainly getting there, and things are certainly starting to move forward. And you know, the recognition's half the battle, isn't it? And that's happening.
Absolutely. And do you have many opportunities, Samantha, to influence that in your role, in your current role? Are there opportunities to kind of do more of that, sharing that knowledge and help to educate others? You know, I'm not talking necessarily community, I'm talking perhaps more healthcare workers.
Yeah, so I think there's certainly opportunities. So one thing that I will be doing, I'm just changing it a little bit, because some of the people that are in my team have never done an in-service or delivered an in-service, I should say, before. So I have in-services from previous roles that I've done that are about, you know, closing the gap about Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander culture and about healthcare and how it affects our people. So I'm just writing, I guess, a bit more of a script, so that way if I'm not there and they deliver the in-service, then they kind of, I guess, know what to say, especially because it'll be the first time some of them are doing it. And I think, and that'll be for our staff within the unit, and I think that's really important. But I also think it's really important to empower our people. So, you know, staff that are in my group, some of them are new, some of them have been nursing for, you know, 5, 6, 7 years, but they've never done any of this stuff before. So then for me to support them, I think it's really important to give them opportunities to step out of their comfort zones and, you know, do these things. I have before, not as much in nursing, but I've done in-services for, you know, the doctors, or I've done health round, you know, little in-services and different things like that, or grand rounds that hospitals sometimes call them. And, you know, I've done a bit of that for the doctors, and I find that the doctors are really engaging, and they, you know, they challenge you, they will ask you questions, and they will sort of, you know, do those sort of things. And I think that's really good. I find a lot of the time nurses are a bit, I don't know if timid's the right word, but they don't sort of maybe approach things the same way as the doctors do. You know, they're very, I guess, forward in how they ask everything, whereas nurses tend to stand back a little bit and then later will come forward and ask questions. But
and there's such a need for that, isn't there? Because I just think about my own, you know, experience here in Western Australia, having had attended a 2-day course all about understanding kind of Aboriginal health issues here in WA, and that was delivered by people who were or did identify as Aboriginal, and it was one of the best courses that I've ever attended in terms of understanding the cultural aspects, because it was delivered by people who were living that and understood it and could explain so many things. And I took away so much from those 2 days, only then to learn that the funding for that was being withdrawn. And you know, you kind of struggle with that. I can remember coming away thinking, why would the funding be withdrawn from something that is hugely important, absolutely needed? And everyone who attended those 2 days said the same thing. They'd learnt so much. And then we fast forward a few years later, and we have, you know, a mandatory online, almost, I want to say, ticker box cultural awareness, which didn't give you anything like the context context that I certainly got from attending this 2-day course, which, yes, it was challenging, but it was challenging in a good way, because it helped you to understand, you know, the things that perhaps you think are correct, which are not. So it corrected your own assumptions about things and helped you to put into context things like the stolen generations, you know, and the impact of that and the legacy and how that almost carries forward, were some of the most powerful things I took away. But, you know, the sadness around that doesn't, a tick box kind of mandatory, I don't even know how long it was, I think it was probably 30 minutes, if that, doesn't equate at all. It's like polar opposites, you know. And I think that's such a shame, because the more we engage with communities and the more we listen and the more we try to understand, the more I think the bigger the impact that is going to have, because we do need to listen. And that's been, I'm sure, part of the problem historically. You know?
Yeah, we used to have a similar program up in Queensland, from what people have told me up here. And it was the same thing. It was a 1 to 2 day course. And now ours is a 30-minute online sort of mandatory training when you start with Queensland Health.
Yeah. And
I think,
Sorry, go on, you go.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think that's where it's important to, you know, recognise different people that work in your areas and in departments, and I guess take advantage of knowledge and use them. And most hospitals also now have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander liaisons as well. And, you know, there's capability teams that'll come out and things. So that there's certainly other options out there now that you can get people to come out and maybe do some more education with, and do some things regularly, and, you know, run your own initiatives and programs out of your department to improve it.
And that's true. I'm not, you know, I think we also have access to those services that are hugely valuable and supportive. I just think for me there's something there about, you know, if you get starting off your career, let's say nursing, but it applies really to all health professional careers, to have that understanding from the beginning helps you to then understand the nursing kind of skills, and particularly communication skills that are needed. You know, that's where there's a bit of a gap, I think, and certainly your experience highlighted that, you know, in the assignment that you had to do. And you'd like to think that those things have changed, and it's a more positive, more accurately reflects culture, your culture, Aboriginal culture, and Torres Strait Islander culture. But, you know, there's still, I think, a lot to do in that space.
There is a lot to do. And I think if you look at the Close the Gap targets, it reflects that there's still much more we can do. So two of the biggest targets, one of them we have already failed, which was halving childhood mortality for children under 5. And that was meant to be met in 2018. It wasn't met.
No.
And then the one at the moment is to halve the life expectancy by 2031.
Yeah.
And again, we're not on track for that, you know. Yeah. So I think there's still, that shows us, you know, that there is still certainly more that we can do, and more that needs to be done.
Yeah. And I know that we've also got some not so good statistics here in WA, you know, in areas where exactly that, you know, we know that the gap's actually grown in some places, not reduced, and not meeting the targets, a long way off actually meeting the targets. And that must be frustrating, really, for you working in healthcare, to see that as well.
Yeah, I think that's why, you know, I usually try and do different things and try so much to work in roles, or, you know, to do additional roles to help close the gap. So that way, you know, I can tell people. But I think half the biggest battle is, if you want to do something within healthcare, then you need to involve the community. You need to have the people there. You need to, you know what their feelings are, their perspectives are. And that's because that's the way that you're going to close it. And I think some places are certainly starting to do it, but I definitely think that, you know, any of these initiatives that are going for change in hospital, they have to have an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person from the community who is sitting on these boards and on these panels and helping to make these decisions with the community's involvement as a spokesperson. Like, I don't think you can run any of these without somebody that identifies sitting on the board or the panel with them making the decisions.
No. And it also has spin-offs in other ways, doesn't it, in terms of, you know, kind of the statistics around the number of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people working in health is very, very small. And I think the more we do around engagement and involving community, the more that's going to encourage people to think about a career in health, whether that's nursing, medicine, allied health. That is a spin-off that I can see. You know, if we do more of that, it's going to help people to want to come and work more in health.
Yeah, and that's certainly something I guess I've looked at doing now with COVID and everything else. Unfortunately, it's not quite the right time. But what I have in mind, I guess, for the future is I'd really like to be a part of and develop a mentoring program.
Yeah.
So that way we can have people that come from different communities, you know, and some universities are already starting to do this, where they'll do distance education for nursing and midwifery, so they can still be in their communities and they come into, you know, regional areas for their placements. But I want to take it, I guess, one step further and link them with somebody who actually works in the hospital system, or, you know, if they're interested in aged care, who works in aged care, or wherever they're interested in, you know, those sort of areas, and link them with somebody that does identify and already works within the system and has that experience and has already gone through some of those battles. And try and, you know, get these people to do more distance learning and then keep them in their communities, or at least get them to go back to their community. Then they can be a midwife or a nurse within their communities. And I think then that's, you know, how, because it's one of their own people as well, you know, then we've got the community engagement in that area. And I think that's one way where we can definitely get people to, I guess, you know, feel more confident to come into hospitals, because then it also means that, you know, this person that's in the communities can say, no, it's all good. You know, sis is over working at this hospital, so if you go in there, you know, I'll call sis up, and you've got someone, you know, gives them a safety thing, so then they know when they come into a hospital in a more regional area, they're linked with someone in that hospital already. So it creates that gap, and, you know, I think that's half the battle is connections.
And it's, you know, we've got the technology to drive that now, haven't we? I think lots of ways COVID, whilst it's been, you know, hugely challenging for many, has actually driven innovation and driven new ways of working, and that enables that more kind of remote learning. And I, you know, the other thing, as you were talking, I was thinking there, certainly in Western Australia, there's always difficulties trying to recruit to remote and rural areas, you know, because often people want to stay in the metro, they don't want to travel. And that would be a great way of, you know, encouraging local communities to take up those careers with support, but be able to stay in those regional or remote areas. You know, it requires a bit of creativity, but that's nothing that, it's nothing realistically that can't be solved, because we know that, I mean, if you look at telehealth as an example, you know, a few years back, telehealth was, you know, not particularly widespread, and it's massively moved forward. So there are ways of doing this. It just takes, I often think you've got to find the right person or people, you know, to help you drive those ideas and innovation, and, you know, who is it that can help? It's identifying those people to help you to drive a really kind of good idea forward. And I think what you've suggested there, you know, it is doable. It absolutely is doable if there's the willingness and the commitment to it, to make a difference and to close the gap and to increase, you know, the targets around Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander in health. You know, it's much needed, because those statistics are not great either, are they, when you look at the numbers?
No, unfortunately, if you're looking at numbers, they're not very good in a lot of different areas. Despite, even our numbers, and I think you mentioned earlier, you know, our numbers of employment, the aim, or at least around here, the aim is only 3% to identify, and we can't even make 3%.
No. And that staggers me, you know, when you think about percentage terms, that we've set the bar low, really. And I know there's a country health service here in Western Australia, and their percentage is higher than 3. But even so, there's still much more to do in terms of increasing that.
Yeah, there is. And I think through doing this role already, what I found is particularly it's more North Queensland, where there are more numbers of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders around, but they have clinics that are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health clinics that, you know, and they promote that they have 90% of their staff identify.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, I think it's because there are obviously a lot more people up in North Queensland that do identify themselves as well.
Yeah.
But it is amazing to think that you can have a clinic that has 90% of its staff that identify in that clinic.
Yeah.
You know, so the success and different things they, you know, would have and get from that, I think would be absolutely amazing. And part of it is, well, how in North Queensland, when we know North Queensland's very spread out and far between places, how have they got A, that many people that have qualified, and B, that retained that, you know, many staff to stay working in those areas? And I think, you know, it's places when you find health services and clinics like that, they're the ones we need to talk to and say, well, what are you doing? Like, what can we learn from you?
Yeah. And that's, you know, that comes back to what you were saying about, you know, there being a lack of academic articles around, you know, closing the gap and the health issues. And how are we sharing that? You know, why is that not being written up in the academic literature? Because that's, you know, that number of people, there's obviously something that is working that actually should be shared with everyone else. And you know, I know that there are differences with different states, but that's more around how things are managed. The needs of Aboriginal communities, Torres Strait Islander communities are, you know, going to be similar. So that learning should be being shared. I think that's a really valid point that you make, Samantha, about, you know, understanding how that's so successful and what can we learn and how can that be replicated, and why are we not writing about it? Why is that not something that we can readily find out, you know?
Well, I think part of it, I think, potentially comes from, I guess, you know, intergenerational trauma and the mistrust of government, you know, that I guess people pass down, and again, that comes from storytelling. So I know quite a few of, you know, my people, they don't want to share with other people their stories and things because there's, you know, they don't feel like that trust is there. So sometimes, you know, these things are certainly out there, but we don't know about them because we haven't gone out and earned their trust. And I think, you know, part of that is, I guess there's 3 big examples from this year of, and I've spoken, and this comes from people in the community, not necessarily my thoughts, but, you know, people in the community that I've spoken to. And, you know, when I ask them, you know, what is it? Why don't you want to come to hospitals? What don't you want to do? And they say, well, look at what's happening at the moment. Look at what's happening around us, and why would we want to? You know, they obviously use the mine, the Jakun Gorge, which is in Pilbara, you know, that was blown up, you know. That was a big thing. We know there's 46,000 years of culture in that gorge, 46,000 years, and it was blown up and destroyed, you know. And then so the people over there are going, well, why would we trust the government? You know, down in Victoria at the moment, they're currently rallying to get the Jaburang trees down there. They're 800-year-old birthing trees. So that means for 800 years, birthing trees, that's where the, you know, women's businesses happened. Women have come there to birth their babies on land and, you know, on country. And 800-year-old trees, and they're looking at getting rid of them for a highway. You know, and then you've got up here, we've got Deebing Creek. Deebing Creek, we know, was an Aboriginal mission. And if you speak to people out at Deebing Creek, they will also tell you it was a massacre site. And again, they're building apartments and residential areas on top of the land without investigating these things, you know. So when I speak to these people in the community, I say, well, what do you need from us? What can I do to help you come and trust us and come to hospitals? And that's their examples. How can we trust you? You work for the government. How can we trust the government when these things are still happening, you know?
And that's that, you know, that's it's must be a very raw subject, that, because those, you know, just those three examples that you highlight there are, you know, culturally really significant and important part of culture and history and Aboriginal history. And I guess that, you know, that feeling of mistrust and not being listened to doesn't encourage, does it? It, as you say, it just poses the question, why should we trust? And those examples illustrate we've still got an awful long way to go if we're to be authentic in, you know, authentic and serious about wanting to make a difference and close the gap. Then you have to also display, you know, that you recognize the cultural significance of these things. And if that's not happening, then we're going to forever struggle with closing the gap, because people don't feel that they can trust you. That's one of the basic fundamental human needs, isn't it? Trust. Do I feel comfortable? Do I trust you? And if the answer to that is no, then you're never going to get the engagement around the targets that are being set. So I think those examples highlight there's a long way to go if we're to change that perception against the backdrop of, you know, the historical trauma, if you like, from stolen generations. It kind of compounds that, doesn't it, even more, really?
Yeah, and I think that's where I struggle, because I guess I'm caught between two worlds in a way, almost, you know. Obviously I identify, and the older I get, I guess the stronger and the more passionate about that I'm getting. And the more I realize that there are gaps, and the more it drives me to want to make changes and close these gaps and work with our people and embrace our people. But at the same time, I also have my healthcare hat on, which sort of says, okay, well, I know there's a gap here. Now we've got to work out how can we meet it, what can we do, you know, and trying to find a balance between the two can be quite hard. I know maternity services still have a lot of struggling, particularly in more rural, remote areas. There's still lots of stories today. You know, we know that when you look at foster care systems, that there are a lot more young children who are of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background. And I guess sometimes, you know, depending where it is, we need that understanding that, you know, there's obviously different reasons kids go into care, but in our family systems, you know, your mum might not be your biological mum. So, you know, I think it's also an understanding for that. And I know, you know, obviously they go in and they do the best they can and they assess everything as the best of their abilities, and that's, you know, that's fine. But, you know, why do we still have so many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in care? And why, when they're in care, are they not with somebody that is a family member or that knows culture and can still treat, you know, teach them culture and things, you know, with our people? You know, I still get a lot of people. I had someone a couple of weeks ago who asked me, what can we do to engage people who are pregnant to come in to the hospitals and get checkups done? Because they don't want to, because they're too scared their babies are going to get taken them away. And this is in 2020, but you ask people, you know, when did the stolen generation happen, or when did this happen? Or, you know, kids don't get taken away anymore. But when you go out to these remote areas and you speak to them, they believe that the kids are still getting taken.
It's there's the statistics are not good, really. And I also know, you know, the kind of prison population proportionately, there are issues there around. There are more Indigenous and Torres Strait Island people in prison proportionately than you know, anyone else, and there's a lot of questions around that I think are difficult. They're difficult to answer, difficult to acknowledge, and for communities, again, comes back to that trust. You know, it doesn't help in people presenting early for healthcare support and advice if that is the fear. You know, if you're a mum with a young baby and that fear is there, well, my child might get taken away. That's not going to help in you seeking out healthcare advice or support early. you know. It becomes a situation, doesn't it, where people will only go if it's absolutely, you know, they've tried everything else, so it's almost the last resort, which is not good, really. But
well, we see that happen a lot, and obviously me sitting here, you know, talking about these remote areas, I don't know either side of the story that well. You know, I hear the story of the Aboriginal people saying, no, they're still taking my kids away. Then you hear the stories, you know, coming from the, you know, the health professionals saying, well, you know, this is the reason why, this is what's not being provided, and, you know, and it's not fair on the children. So, you know, you always hear two sides, and
and there's
always
always
the middle point, isn't it? But
and it's being open to really, again, it's kind of suspending your judgment, isn't it, and really kind of listening and listening to try and understand. And I don't think that always happens. There's those preconceived ideas, and people think they know what the issues are without actually really listening to understand, and that's that's the challenging bit. Is how you get that to happen. Samantha, do you mentor people that are coming into nursing who identify? Do you have a role there in terms, because I know you mentioned mentorship, I just wonder whether that's something that you do.
It's something I would like to do, but there is no program at the moment. There's nothing like it. No. And that's what I guess I wanted to try and start. You know, we've got hospitals that have have relationships with universities. You know, and it is something that I would like to start. It's something I have, I guess, spoken to many people about over the last few years. But so far it's not something that's happened.
Because that's, you know, that to have somebody who, you know, is a positive role model, who is working, you know, in a service that's doing a lot to try and close some of that gap, I think is to someone who's just starting out, to be able to connect and see your growth and see the good work that you're doing is a really positive role model for them. And I think that's also really important, really, in terms of growing, you know, the next generation of nurses and understanding the culture and understanding that, you know, for you to be working in the role that you're doing, you must get a lot of reward from that. Even though there's challenges and it's difficult, it must be hugely rewarding to be a part of that.
It is rewarding. I think, you know, every small thing that you do is one extra thing that's going to be beneficial to the community and to the, you know, to our people. And, you know, you can do so much. And I think that's where this telehealth role will be amazing, because there's not really anything else like this. You know, the simple fact alone that you can call up and you can speak to an Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander nurse on the phone and ask for that. Like that gives, you know, the consumer so much power to be able to ask to speak to someone of culture. But then the other thing that now we're going to have an updated database that's going to have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander specific services is going to be amazing.
And that's, you know, it's small steps, isn't it? But that momentum gathers in terms of change. You've got to start somewhere, and sometimes it's frustratingly slow, but the more traction you get on something and the more that rolls and the more people get to know about it. And I think, you know, even just things like this, talking, you know, to people about it and sharing your story. And if you have the opportunity to write about, it doesn't always have to be an academic piece of writing. There's lots of different ways now that, you know, people write blog posts which are not academic, but it's a way of sharing your experiences and, you know, helping people to understand little by little, you know, that there are ways to do it differently, and we do need to be exploring different ways. I think that's never underestimate the power of one because,
yeah,
you know, sometimes I would imagine it must be really, really frustrating for you, but just doing what you're doing is affecting change. You know, you are making a difference. It's just we need to multiply that across lots of different places. But I think it's, yeah, it must be rewarding in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think most of the time it's rewarding. It can be quite disheartening in some ways as well.
Yeah.
I think I've certainly come home some days and I've just been absolutely shattered because, you know, different projects I'm doing or different things that I want to do have been, you know, I guess taken in different angles. And, you know, some of them, I think without the knowledge, you don't know that it's actually not culturally appropriate.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you know, it still runs that way and things. And sometimes it can be really, really disheartening to see those things and see things that, you know, should be so positive and should be so strong have, you know, maybe, I guess, gone in a different direction that isn't going to be as beneficial as you'd hoped. But I think there's certainly things like this that are, you know, amazing. And some of the jobs that I've done over particularly the last probably 2 years, I've done a lot more positions where I've worked for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health roles.
Yeah.
And I've met some absolutely amazing people that are so strong and so passionate. And, you know, then it brings the light back in to say, yeah, no, there are people out there that have got the same passion as you, that have got the same drive as you, that are all working to make a change. And, you know, and it does empower you when you're in those environments. Like the workplace I'm in at the moment is absolutely amazing. The staff that I'm working with are incredible. You know, they're all so positive, and we did big NAIDOC celebrations and we did a quiz with NAIDOC, you know, to, I guess, see what people knew about Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander health and, you know, give them prizes that were, you know, one of the girls in our group likes to sew and make things. So she made up a whole bunch of headset bags and they were in different prints that had a meaning, and she gave the meaning to people that won the bags and things, you know. So those little things, you know, then you're educating at the same time, and you've got a team that all wants to contribute and, you know, build things up. And I think, it's absolutely incredible when you're surrounded by people like that. But when you're not surrounded by people like that, it can be really daunting and really...
And I can appreciate that's, not always easy. So where...
So I think...
Sorry, go on, you say.
I was just going to say, I think it's really, really good when you find those people that are really positive.
And it's finding them, isn't it, and connecting with them. It's, you know, because they're the people who can support you really on those days where you, like you said, you come home and you just think, oh, you know, they're the people who can keep you going, really. Because that was one of the things I was going to ask you. You know, how do you look after you when you have those challenging times? Because they are challenging. Nursing itself is a challenging job, but I think you are also dealing with additional challenges because you're aware of them and trying to make a difference. And how do you manage that for you?
I think in some ways I've gotten a bit stronger as well. So if I believe that something's not appropriate, then, you know, I won't have an argument or anything about it. I will just walk away from it and leave it, you know, and then I'll just not engage, you know, so that way then I don't get the burden of, you know, keeping to go back to something that I don't feel like is culturally appropriate, you know. And for me, I think that certainly helps to be, you know, and it maybe, you know, I'll say, well, you can speak to this person, they might be able to help you, but, you know, it's not for me. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned now is that it's okay to walk away when you think something's not appropriate or not, you know, that you don't have to, you know, do everything that people want you to do, or you don't have to do these initiatives, you know, just because people want you to and things. And then my partner's quite supportive at home, which is good. We live on acreage, so I've got lots of trees around me. And, you know, we've got chickens and dogs and different things. So, you know, it certainly helps to, I think, come home and, you know, for us, and that's what it's like in the hospital system, I guess, for our patients. But for me, you know, it certainly does coming home and, you know, having land around me and having trees and that sort of stuff. Like that's, I guess, what I need to go forward and to feel okay. And that's what our people struggle with when they're in hospitals is that they don't have that opportunity. So I'm quite lucky and quite blessed, I think, with where I'm living, and I have a really good partner and really good friends and around me.
And that connection to country is significant, isn't it, in terms of what that does for your mental health and well-being is. And as you say, I used to think that all the time, seeing patients coming into Metro, and it's the city, and quite often from a kind of rural area, and that must be really, really hard, hard. And that's what keeps you grounded.
Yes, it does. And I guess that's why I say, I'm lucky and I'm quite privileged in a lot of ways. I have the opportunity to have all of this, and technically I'm still in somewhat of a metro area, yet I've also got on a few acres and things, so quite lucky, I think, for me.
Well, that's good. Can I ask you, what advice would you give to somebody, Samantha, just starting out in their career, who identifies as Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander person? What advice would you give them, knowing what you know and kind of all the things that you've gone through and learnt and grown as a person? What would you say to them?
I think my biggest thing is find your mentor and find your people. Because nursing in general, irrelevant of identity, nursing, as you've already said, it is challenging. It is hard. My background mostly for almost 17 years has been in the front line, and it certainly hasn't been easy at times. It certainly is struggling, but I think finding that mentor, that person that you can go and talk to that understands healthcare is what's really beneficial. And if you can find someone that also understands your culture, then you're killing it. You're winning already. You're half the battle's there. And I think that's what the hard thing is just finding that person to link with. But even also, for me moving up here, I didn't really know anywhere and I didn't know what to do. So I went and I just met some of the elders that are up here, and I just went and sat in their room, I guess, because they've, most elders groups have like a community room where you can just go and sit and hang out, and that's just what I did. And I just went and sat in those rooms because I didn't know where else to go and didn't know anyone else. And and I did that. Or university was really supportive because they have the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander unit and things, and I think it's good to link in with people.
And that connection's important, isn't it? And I was just thinking when you're talking, because I know there's a phrase that you used before, and when I first came here, I loved hearing the word yarning, because I think for me, I just think it's a lovely word. It just conjures up that whole being part of a community and having a natter and being connected, and you reference that. And I've heard people talk a lot about that. And I just think it's a lovely expression. But so I think that's good advice to give to somebody who's just starting out. And I think the other thing I really want to ask you, Samantha, is what would you most like to be remembered for in your career?
I don't think there's anything I want to be remembered for. I guess myself, what I want to remember is that I've contributed to closing the gap for my people. I think, having my name isn't the end, be all sort of thing. I don't necessarily want to be remembered for anything in particular. I just want to be a part of closing the gap for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people. And, and if I can be a part of that, and if I can contribute to making change and making that gap be closed, and there being no such thing as a close the gap, I think that would be, I think, a biggest achievement, is to just be part of that.
And that's your passion, isn't it? That's what comes out when you talk. You articulate all of that really well when you talk about, your communities and your people. And I think to have a passion like that and a vision is the thing that drives you and keeps you going forward on the days where it's tough and challenging. That's the bit that helps you get where you need to be. And I think you know, it's a good mindset to have, Samantha, and I'm sure you will have lots of opportunities to influence and educate and carry on the work that you've started. And I really genuinely hope that, you know, by telling your story and people listening to this, that, you know, maybe somebody will get in touch and say, hey, that's a really great idea about mentorship. How can we help you? Because at the end of the day, that's what this is about. It's about connections. It's about people telling stories. It's about, you know, me giving a voice to somebody to be able, for then someone to listen and think, actually, that's something I can help with. And if, you know, that's something that comes out of this for you, you know, I would really hope that that is the case, that somebody listening will think, actually, I need to talk to Samantha because she's got some great ideas. And how do we make that happen? Because it's not that difficult. It's just knowing, sorry, I don't mean to reduce that down. It's a big issue. What I'm meaning is, if you know the people who can help you, it makes it easier, is what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
I think that's important, you know.
Well, it certainly does. And for me, I'm trying to, I guess, combine two passions. You know, I love my people and I want to close the gap for my people, but I also like frontline. So I guess something I do look at doing is, you know, early next year, I want to start looking at retrieval jobs. You know, so I'll be obviously working out of a plane or a chopper and going out to areas and picking people up that are unwell. But I guess part of that, what I'd love to do as well is, you know, when I go and pick up somebody that identifies in those areas, is then also say, you know, how can we as a retrieval service, once I eventually get into it, but how can we as a retrieval service, how can we then benefit those people in that community by taking their family member away, and what can we do from a retrieval perspective to, I guess, facilitate their recovery within this hospital that we're taking them to as well. And, you know, because at the end of the day, you know, yes, we just do that short service and, you know, and that would be it for retrievals. But at the same time, we're also seen as a person that's coming in to help their family member and to save their family member, but we're also seen as a person that's taking them away. So, you know, I guess for me, like, that's my next goal, is that I want to, I guess, combine both my passions and, you know, still work in the front line, but also work on how I can close that gap. And I think that would be something amazing to achieve and be part of a team that does that.
That's a great goal to have, Samantha. A great goal to have. And I would love to come back and you know, in a couple of years and interview you and say, right, you know, tell me, because I've no doubt you will do that. You are passionate about, you know, what you do, and I have no doubt that you will achieve that. And it honestly, it's been lovely to talk with you today, you know, because I think it's an important story to hear, and we've covered a lot of things in there, and I really thank you for your time today.
Yeah, it's been, I think, quite good. I was obviously quite nervous about it, as you knew.
I know.
But it's I think it's been quite good, and it is positive. And I think just doing these things and being given the opportunities like this to, you know, get your story out and to talk about these things, you know, this is how we're going to close the gap, is by speaking about it. I think you're providing an amazing opportunity to people to be able to do that.
Oh, thank you.